Tonight, carjacking in Canadian streets. I'll tell you what we can do about the taxi cartel that's gone too far. It's December 10th. You're watching The Ezra Levant Show. Why should others go to jail when you're the biggest carbon consumer I know?
There's 8,500 customers here, and you won't give them an answer.
You come here once a year with a sign, and you feel morally superior.
The only thing I have to say to the government for why I publish it is because it's my bloody right to do so.
I want to talk to you about the misconduct by taxi cartels around Canada in their attempt to make their competitors illegal, like the popular car service that works on your smartphone called Uber. I've never met anyone who prefers a cab to an Uber once they've tried Uber. Cabs can't compete, so they're trying to get the government to ban Uber. And if that doesn't work, they're trying to basically wreck things. I mean, check out this insanity from Toronto yesterday, where taxis brought the downtown of the city to a standstill. Not just the downtown. They occupied major arteries leading into the city, like the Don Valley Parkway, just driving together 5 miles an hour like a bunch of bullies, making tens of thousands of people late for work, late for school, late for appointments. Oh yeah, and the odd ambulance too. I'm sure that heart attack victim or burn victim or whoever was in there could afford to wait a little longer while these cabbies acted out. Or then there's this thug. Just take a look.
Look at this in the back. Yeah, he has a computer.
Wow, consider me persuaded by that brilliant public relations masterstroke. I mean, who wouldn't be convinced by that guy that cabs are the better way to go? By the way, I have no idea if that really was an Uber car he attacked. It might have been, maybe it wasn't. He says there was someone in the back of the car, so that proves it. Really? And does that also make it okay for a madman to physically attack a car, to hit it, to ride along on it? I mean, is that carjacking? If that's not the crime of attempted carjacking, I don't know what it is. And what would he do if he was successful? Get in the car and drive it with the passenger in the back? Would he hit the passenger? Yesterday was one of the worst I've seen, but it's not the first. Remember this craziness from Ottawa a few months ago? This was a three-way fight in Ottawa, a fight between Uber and the taxi cartel, and then a fight between the taxi cartel and its union. Check out this lawlessness on the main road leading to Ottawa's airport. Yeah, that's safe. And then there's this guy screaming at an actual passenger. Check out this madness.
This is your face. I'm calling the police right now. Yeah, Uber is illegal in Ottawa. Okay? You have to come. I'm telling you, you will be in trouble, I promise you.
Yeah, buddy, a screaming man threatening me, telling me to get into his car. Pretty much the walking, talking symbol of taxi cab bad behavior. You couldn't make a TV commercial for Uber that was more persuasive to abandon cabs than what that cab thug did. He actually recorded it himself. Now, of course, this conduct is a disgrace. Of course, it is an admission that cab companies cannot convince passengers they're worth it, so they want to intimidate their competitors and obviously intimidate passengers too. For years, these taxis had a cartel, a monopoly, in collusion with city politicians against mere citizens. That's how it usually works. That's called crony capitalism. Companies cut deals with bureaucrats and politicians, and voters and taxpayers are left out. The late Robert Conquest had 3 laws of politics. Number 3 was this: the simplest way to explain the behavior of any bureaucratic organization is to assume that it is controlled by a cabal of its enemies. That's what he wrote. Now, what that would mean in this case is a city transportation commission, a city taxi commission, it doesn't actually work for the people who need to be transported. It works for their enemies, people who want to fleece them for all they're worth. Economists call that regulatory capture, where vested interests control the bureaucracies that are supposed to regulate them, control them through lobbying, actually putting their own people on the inside, and they control politicians through donations. Well, it's all coming undone Now, I have some sympathy for the poor schmo who took his life savings and bought a taxi license, also called a medallion, that's highly limited to keep the cartel tight. Some of those medallions in Toronto used to go for more than $250,000. Do you understand what I'm saying? The cost of a nice car to drive around as a cab is maybe 40 grand, 50 grand for a nice one. But the license itself, it was so tightly limited, it was a quota, so prized, it would be worth many more, times more than that. And so someone who had a license could sell that license for a huge profit, or could rent it out to poor taxi drivers, half of whose day would be spent working just to rent the medallion, the license, before they could keep a penny for themselves. Uber destroyed all that. It lets anyone turn their own car into a kind of a cab, but not just any cab, a clean cab. A cab that is precisely and immediately dispatched to exactly where you are via the GPS in your phone. A cab that you can track on your phone so you're not wondering, is it coming? When's it coming? Is it going to come at all? A cab where you know the driver's name in advance, have his photo in advance. He has your name too. You rate him. He rates you. So everyone is better behaved. Everyone is less rude, more clean, more civil, more fun actually. Obviously it's paid automatically from your app, so you're not waiting at your destination for the credit card machine. You're not waiting for cash, no haggling, no worried about foreign currency, nothing like that. The receipt is emailed to you, including your route. Once you go Uber, you never go back, so obviously they must be stopped. I mean, no one hated Thomas Edison more than the Candlestick Makers Union. First of all, it was totally unfair, his light bulb. I mean, obviously, that's self-evident, no need to explain. Secondly, what about the jobs? I mean, you make one light bulb and it lasts for what, a year, several years? Some light bulbs might last for 10 years. But you need a new candle every few hours. What about the candlestick makers and their families? What about people who just poured their life savings into buying a candle factory? You get my point? Technology and entrepreneurship and freedom has just done for us what our politicians and bureaucrats would not do. They've made a better mousetrap and cut through the red tape and corruption in one fell swoop. And it's also fun on your phone. It's almost like a game. This is the future. I have no more sympathy for these taxi drivers than I do for horse and buggy whip makers fighting against the car, or newspapers fighting against the internet. It's called creative destruction. It liberates people from doing old, wasteful, obsolete work and gets them into better work. I myself was let go, along with 200 others from the Sun News Network TV station, but after a bit of wondering, we're building something here better in a new technology. That's called progress. And what's my point? My point is that Uber and other similar companies, one is called Lyft, for example, there's a dozen competitors yet to be born. One day Uber itself will be succeeded. Well, these new companies only exist because ordinary Canadians voluntarily choose to use them, not through coercion. That's all the cab companies have left, you see, coercion, pressure the politicians, sue Uber in court. And if that doesn't work, when that doesn't work, physically block the streets, physically attack cars, shout at girls. You know what has to happen? The law has to come in now, not to ban Uber. That's an attack on freedom. The law has to come in and protect our city streets. Stop that attempted carjacking. You saw that. It was crazy. Stop the illegal blockades. Stop the ambulance blockers. Stop the thuggery. You don't even have to love Uber or use it or like it. This is about the rule of law now. If you and two of your buddies got in your cars and took up 3 lanes in a major road, and you all really slowed down your cars together in the middle of the street to make like a slow-rolling roadblock, do you think the police would stand by and let you continue your protest all through the day and evening rush hour too? If you attacked some stranger's car, carjacking style like that one guy did, even if you had a really good reason, like you were really mad, do you think you would get away without charges, let alone a caution by police? Since when do unions and leftists and cartels and crony capitalists get a special free pass when it comes to law breaking? It reminds me of Greenpeace and their perpetual trespass and vandalism. Imagine if, say, an oil company fought back against Greenpeace in the same way. Imagine if Uber did some sort of illegal stunt like this to the cabbies. I mean, it's unthinkable because they're law-abiding to begin with. But even if they were to do something so absurd like that, you better believe the mayor and city council and police would come down on them like a ton of bricks saying, no one's above the law. Well, why are taxi companies and taxi drivers above the law then? I've drafted a petition, but this one is to Canada's police chiefs. Right now, it's just to the police chiefs in Toronto and Ottawa, because that's where these videos I showed you were from, but we'll add more later if we need to in other cities. The text of the petition is this: we demand that Toronto and Ottawa police enforce traffic safety bylaws and the criminal code against taxi drivers illegally harassing Uber drivers and their customers. How could you disagree with that? Will you sign our petition? Go to WeLoveUber.ca. You don't actually have to love Uber. You just have to love freedom and hate the idea of carjackings going on while the police stand by and do nothing. Stay with us. Lots ahead on the show. Welcome back to the program. Today, the first 150 official Syrian refugees were flown in to Canada, to Pearson Airport and Trudeau Airport in Montreal. Of course, thousands of refugees from Syria and the region have come to Canada already this year and in years previous. But these were the special hullabaloo ones. These were the ones that came through the Liberal Party, the Liberal government's new processing centers. It's funny to me because the government has set aside about $500,000 in propaganda money to have a marketing campaign for Canadians to welcome these Syrians. I don't know why they spent any money. I mean, for example, the Toronto Star gave their entire front page welcome. They even wrote it in Arabic. There's a lot of jubilation, but not a lot of people asking basic accountability questions like what kind of screening was done. And joining us now to talk about that is my friend Ross McLean. Ross, you're a security specialist, former Toronto police officer. Great to have you on the show.
Good to be here, Ezra.
We want the best for these people. We hope that they become great Canadians. We hope that they embrace our liberal values. We hope it's not just Muslim men who are economic migrants. We hope that these are actually people who are in danger, women and children, not just guys. Jury's out on that. But one thing that scares me, and I'd like you to respond to this. Yesterday, Brian Lilly went to an off-the-record, on-background briefing, a technical briefing by Canadian immigration officials in Ottawa. And he asked them, how many refugees that you've screened have been rejected so far? It's a good question.
It's a great question.
They said 0. They haven't rejected any. What do you make of that?
Well, this is something where my concern is, what is the threshold they have here for determining that someone should come in or not? If they don't come out and they don't register as having been involved in terrorist activity before, you're okay. So this is the question. Are they just taking forms, running them through standard databases? I mean, I assume most people aren't going to be in the Canadian Police Information System. Mm-hmm. They're not going to be in the U.S. Information System. But how do you even know who these people are, Ezra? That's the biggest concern for me. You have all of these documents, and documents, as we've seen, you can buy them over there. You can buy fraudulent documents for passports, for names. You can actually buy, I'm told, fraudulent real documents from the ministries over there. If you pay the money, you'll get it done, you'll have a name for it.
Well, I mean, when the Islamic State took over some Syrian offices, they took over the machinery to print ID cards. So you're right. I mean, you can give an official, here's $100, give me an ID card, or you could go to the Islamic State's Syrian office and get a real ID card.
Right, and what you can also do is, don't forget, there's been tens of thousands of people murdered over there. So there's lots of identity theft that you could do. You could just take over someone's identity that isn't registered as being dead. Their name, their address, their cards, and all of these things, fill them out. So the question is, what sort of check are they actually doing? Are they just looking at the boxes and checking them off? Or are they doing follow-ups on these?
And that's not an idle question, because, of course, the female terrorist in San Bernardino, she passed through 2 vettings before she was granted a fiancé visa to come to the United States. In one of her forms, she was asked, well, what town are you from? So she wrote where she was from in Pakistan. It didn't exist. Like, she made up a place, which is sort of weird. It was never checked. So and I see these photos from these state-of-the-art screening facilities in Jordan, and we see people filling out forms. Are they just filling out the forms, or does anyone then take that form and say, okay, I'm going to go to this town or phone this town or check what someone in this town, or they just say, okay, filled out the form, stamp, you're approved, go, we got to make our quota today?
Well, see, this is what takes time, for instance. Let's say I was checking someone out. I might have your name, you give me a passport, I'll ask if you had a cell phone before, so I'll try and put some things together, numbers, and see if they're registered to you, and I'll try and find 3 or 4 different factors that all line up that show that, yes, this is likely you. But I'm not sure to what length they're going on this with the checks here. I don't see how they do it in the time frame that they have, Ezra.
Well, that's the thing. In all of the official PR from the Liberals so far, it's so clear that they are obsessed with hitting 500 a day. And I don't know why. And I don't know why they're obsessed with a December deadline for 10,000 and then a February deadline for another 25,000. Like, where are these artificial quotas coming from that force everything else to be so hasty? It scared me when Brian reported back from Ottawa that not a single person was rejected. You reject people. I mean, would you, you know what? We screen people for jobs, we screen people for babysitters, we screen people to be Cub Scout leaders, and not 100% get okayed. 100% of people from Syria meet our tests? I don't believe it.
Well, that's the question. The U.S., I saw some numbers out of the U.S. where they screened 25,000. And out of the 25,000, they only accepted 2,500. So they only had a 10% pass rate. So that really is the question here, is what constitutes a failure? You know, if somebody has got absolutely no ID, now, do they still get in if they say, my name is this and I've got nothing negative on you? So is this a negative you have to disprove, or are they positively finding that these people should be coming in here, Ezra? You
know, it's hard to ask these accountability questions when the media is still in jubilation mode, cheerleading mode. Literally, the front page of the Toronto Star has a welcome, and it's written in Arabic too. But there's got to be a grown-up. There's got to be someone saying, you know what, you guys go out there and have the celebrations and fly your Syrian flags and do all that. We will check for killers, because, you know, once the hangover from the party is over, if there is in these 25,000, if there's a needle in the haystack, an ISIS sleeper cell, we're in trouble. Let me show you a quick clip of a U.S. congressman confirming evidence that Islamic State terrorists have come to America in the guise of refugees. Take a look at this.
The United States government has information to indicate that individuals tied to terrorist groups in Syria have already attempted to gain access to our country through the U.S. refugee program.
You know, Ross, the idea that they would only go to the United States and not come here when we're taking as many as America is simply a fantastical hope. They have named Canada repeatedly as a target. There are Canadian terrorists have gone over there. And finally, we see that a radical Islamic school that this terrorist murderer in San Bernardino went to, you know, the founders, he's here in Mississauga. To think that we don't have to screen, that we're somehow immune to this is, I think, a dangerous fantasy. Last word to you.
Well, and that's really the question. So not only the screening on the way in, but I'm concerned about the screening afterwards. What are they going to do post this? As we saw with the woman in San Bernardino, Ezra, she came over. My suspicion is she got training in shooting, firearms, bomb making, all of those things that she brought over with her to help deal with her already radicalized husband. So how many people are coming over here to do that here? Are we going to be able to watch their communications? You know, the U.S., the FBI right now have got 900 open cases that they're watching at for people they're worried about. Yeah. We know the RCMP has mentioned over 100 cases that they're watching here. Yeah. Now we're bringing all these ones in. Do they have the ability to monitor all these people? Well, that's the question.
I think the answer
They're fair questions.
Is, well, and we haven't had real answers to those fair questions. Ross, great to see you here. I'm afraid this story will continue, and I don't think it will end as sweetly as today's welcome headlines. Folks, stay with us. Much more on the Ezra Levant Show after these words.
Looking for the perfect gift? Did you know TheRebel.media has a store? Make a statement with a t-shirt. Have your morning coffee in a Fearless Travel coffee mug. There's even an Ezra Levant bobblehead. It's a one-stop shop for the perfect gift. And don't forget to pick up something for yourself. Go to TheRebel.media/store to find out more.
Welcome back. Well, the Paris Climate Change Jamboree, that massive party with tens of thousands of very important bureaucrats, politicians, diplomats, including 383 from Canada. It's wound up. Can I read you this little quote I got by email? This is from Catherine McKenna. She's Canada's new Liberal Environment Minister. Just get this. Just think about this for a second. She said, "We are committed to moving to a low-carbon economy, and we need to look at what that means." Shouldn't it normally be the other way around? Shouldn't you know what something means before you commit to it? Well, not in the world of global warming, because it's all about virtue signaling. It's all about telling the world how righteous you are. Well, joining us now from Victoria is our friend Dr. Tim Ball, the climatologist, who, like me, is a skeptic not only of the junk science of the global warming side, but of their politics and general wastefulness. Hey, Dr. Ball, nice to see you again.
Thank you, Ezra, and thanks for the opportunity. And your quote and your assessment of it is exactly right. But in today's world, and Farhad Manjoo wrote a book about this, that what you do is you set up your theory and then you go out and find scientists that will create the facts to support you. And that's what's going on here.
Well, you know, and I said this briefly the other day, the word skeptic comes from the Greek word for someone who is looking, inspecting. That's what the word science comes from too. Someone who's investigating, using their senses to check things. So being a skeptic is at the heart of the scientific method. So to say to a scientist, "You're a skeptic," as if that's a criticism, the entire process of inquiry demands skepticism. And you don't just have to be skeptical about the science, but if someone says, "I heartily commit to a low-carbon future," now can someone tell me what I've just committed to? Would you sign a mortgage if you didn't understood what it meant? Would you agree to a promise in a foreign language? But doesn't matter. And what troubles me, Dr. Ball, and I'd like your comment on this, is that the media that we all rely on to be the interpreters and our Sherpas in this conversation, they don't even ask basic questions like, how can you say you're for a low-carbon future before you know what that means? Like that's not even a high-level question. That's like a grade 4 level question. We don't see that in the media, Doctor.
No, but you're exactly right about the word skeptic. And of course, it was one of the arguments I made, because when they said, "Oh, global warming is occurring," and I said, "Yeah, global warming is occurring, but it's not caused by humans," we were branded as skeptics. The word skeptic has a completely different meaning in science as it does in the general community, and that's what they got away with. And gradually, as people started to realize that scientists, and I kept saying it, all scientists are skeptics. If you're not a scientist. But then they got off the hook because global warming stopped, as you know, around 2000, and CO2 continued to increase. And suddenly they had to switch the global warming part of that phrase, global warming skeptic. So it became climate change. And then they looked around for an even more derogatory term to attach to it. And so we became climate change deniers. And of course that, as you know, is the Holocaust association with that. But the problem is that the truth is absolutely meaningless in today's world. It's all about the political spin and the amount of money that you can pay out to get people to these conferences to make it appear like the majority support it. And you also see it, by the way, in the use of the term consensus, because just like skeptic, consensus in science is not a scientific word. You have it in politics, but you don't have it in science, and that's another example of how they've fooled the public by using terms that the public have a different understanding of than the scientific community.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that irritates me about the Alberta carbon tax is how that is universally applauded as fighting climate change. But I don't even think that Rachel Notley, the NDP Premier of Alberta, has ever said this will change the climate by one millionth of a degree. Like, I don't think even she has said that. She just says, we're doing our part, but like there's not even a demand from journalists, from most people in the conversation to say, okay, you say you're doing this in the name of fighting global warming. What kind of a difference will this make? We know it'll make a massive difference to employment in Alberta. We know it'll make a massive difference to the taxes you take in. Will it make any difference at all to the temperature of the world? No one's even asking, I mean, if they're doing this in the name of the environment, what benefits to the environment will it have? They don't even contend that it will have, because they don't have any studies showing that if you take another $3 billion a year from Albertans, the world will change in any way. Here's a question for you, Doctor. Do you think that Justin Trudeau will come back from Paris? He's already back. Do you think he will bring in a national carbon tax the way Alberta has brought in a provincial one?
Oh, he's already said that. And in fact, the energy policy that he's laid out is exactly the energy policy that Maurice Strong, who was the originator of all of this scientific rubbish in the IPCC, that he applied when he was chairman of Ontario Hydro. And you can look at the devastation that that has done to Ontario's energy policy. So exactly the same thing is going on there. But notice that they're using the term carbon. It isn't carbon. Carbon's a solid. They're talking about CO2, which is a gas. So even the fundamentals they get absolutely wrong. Yeah. And by the way, with regard to your comment about that, the Kyoto Protocol, it was admitted by one of the senior scientists that was involved in the IPCC, a guy by the name of Tom Wigley. And he was part of the whole climatic research unit at East Anglia. He said, even if you apply Kyoto in total, in its original demand for lowering of CO2 output, you would not be able to measure the difference that it would make. Yeah. And so they know this. And in fact, Kerry just said in Paris, where they're trying now to persuade the Indians, the Indian government, they're trying to persuade them. Kerry has said, look, this is not going to make any difference in terms of CO2 in the atmosphere, but it's important politically. And of course, Naomi Klein has said the same thing. This is not about the science. This is about the politics of it. And so, and by the way, just to mention, India and China, of course, are holding up any agreement in Paris for exactly what I told you last time we talked. India finally broke the eco-bullying control that these people had, because India came out and said, look, you're telling us the temperature might rise 0.5 degrees in 70 years, and you're not even sure about that. Well, we've got more pressing problems. We've got people starving to death. And that's exactly what they're saying and holding up the whole Paris conference over. And hopefully that will start to swing the tide.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? It may well be that India and China save the rest of us. Dr. Ball, great to talk with you. Appreciate your time as always. We're going to stay in touch. You know why? Because even Canada's so-called conservative parties, even the federal conservatives, even the Wild Rose Party of Alberta, refuse to challenge the conventional wisdom about global warming because they're afraid of being marginalized by the bullies. We are not afraid here, Doctor, and we will continue to speak truth to power. That used to be a leftist thing. That's what we're doing now. Thanks again, Doctor. And by the way, friends, stay with me. After the break, I'll read your viewer feedback. So there's more right after these words.
Ontario residents are being hosed on electricity prices. The latest Auditor General's report says we've been overcharged by $37 billion over the last several years. That works out to nearly $2,800 for every man, woman, and child. Why? Mismanagement and bad policy choices from the Ontario Liberals. It's going to cost us billions more in coming years. Energy Minister Bob Chiarelli won't take responsibility. He's lashing out. It's time for Bob to go. If you agree, go to firebob.ca. That's firebob.ca and make your voice heard.
Hey, welcome back. Here's the viewer feedback part of the show. Kathy writes, just watched the show online. I'm in California. Ezra, you nailed it as usual. Thanks for mentioning Israel in the piece, and great guest. I really appreciate watching smart guys getting it right. Have a great day and continue fighting for freedom. Well, thank you very much. You know, some of the ideas that we took for granted in Canada just a few months ago, like that we were pro-Israel and anti-terrorist and valued national security. You know, when Justin Trudeau said real change, yeah, I think he meant it. I mean, already you can feel our country changing in terms of our foreign policy, abandoning our NATO allies, pulling out of the war against the Islamic State. and bringing in, the new number is 50,000 Muslim migrants by the end of 2016. It's not even 25,000 anymore. That won't just change our foreign policy. That's really domestic social engineering to change the political and cultural makeup of Canada deliberately. I'm afraid Canada is changing for the worse. Bob writes, Ezra, please, if Albertans didn't want a carbon tax, why did they vote in the NDP? Say what you will about voting for change, split voting, etc., but a good number of Albertans voted for this party. As the adage goes, people get the government they deserve. It's time to educate the electorate as opposed to admonishing them for their ignorance about the implications of their ignorance. Well, let me say a few things. First of all, I think part of what we're doing is, I'm not going to call it educating people because that sounds condescending. We're spreading the word. We're revealing things. We're shining a light of scrutiny on things. We're trying to explain things. We're trying to show. So that's our job here. The second thing is I'm going to say, when Albertans voted for the NDP in May, a week after that election, the pollster Abacus data, they surveyed 1,000 Albertans, I think the sample size was, and here's what they found. 93% of Albertans said they were voting for change. Only 7% said they were voting for the NDP itself. So this was not a mandate for the NDP to do anything crazy. And even if it was a mandate for NDP policies, I note, and this is so important, a $3 billion a year carbon tax was not in their campaign platform. So I do not think it is legitimate for them to say we have a democratic mandate for something as massive as a GST. That's how big provincially this new carbon tax is. So no, I think we've got to fight back, we've got to spread the word, and we've got to hold the NDP to account whatever way we can. Eggle writes, don't get me wrong, I'm a longtime supporter of The Rebel and contribute funds monthly. Thank you for that. Lately, I'm of the opinion that they're just spitting into the wind, so to speak, with the constant whining, though justified against the various elected governments. Remember, the Conservatives had ample time to correct many of the injustices, but did next to nothing. What is required is a more substantive challenge using every legal means to correct the injustices of non-democratic decisions. If the majority of people are against a certain government decision, there must be a way to counter this, or were our founders of our Constitution so short-sighted not to provide an escape clause? Well, you know, you raised a lot of good points. First of all, thank you for your generosity. Second of all, look, we're a news source. We're a commentary source. We do some activism, and we've got the StopTheCarbonTax.com campaign. Right now, we do petitions. We sometimes take out ads. Sometimes we hire lawyers, but we can't be the total solution. We want to be part of rebuilding the right in Canada. And yeah, I think we should have public interest lawyers as well. John Carpay, one of my favorite examples. We've worked with him a lot. But look, all of these things need air cover. So if you've got political activists on the ground, if you've got lawyers in court, you need air cover. And by that, I mean media coverage, because you're not going to get it from the mainstream media. You're not going to get it from the CBC. They're going to ignore you, or if they give you coverage, they're going to demonize you and marginalize you. So I think that's an important point. And you know, it is true that we're hollering, and I'm not going to call it whining, although maybe I do sound whiny. Our job is to scrutinize and to criticize things that we think is going wrong. And between, I mean, look, I'm a Calgary boy originally. Between left-wing Mayor Naheed Nenshi, left-wing Premier Rachel Notley, and left-wing Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, things have changed. There is a lot to criticize, believe me. Okay, Sam Young writes, Ezra didn't read out any hate mail on the show. Boo! Well, here's one for you, Sam. All right, and we blocked out some of the swears. Vaughn's World writes, F you, Ezra. You're a... See, I'm not even going to say that whole word. Well, all I would say to you, Vaughn's World, is that when you say you're a, and then have a swear there, your is spelled Y-O-U''. When you do Y-O-U-R, that's your, as in something that you own, yours. Y-O-U'' is short for you are. So when you say you are a C word, you have to use the apostrophe. Look, I'm just trying to help you, okay? Hey, folks, send me your fan mail, your hate mail, everything in between. You can do that at Ezra at TheRebel.media. You can do that on our Facebook page. You can tweet me on Twitter, or you can write it just right below the video here, right there on the website itself. We've got a lively comment section. You know, the CBC is shutting down a lot of their comment sections. Globe and Mail, Toronto Star, these folks just shutting them down. Here at The Rebel, we like a lively conversation. We do try and edit out the worst of the profanity just to keep it fun, but we like a spicy debate. I'm Ezra Levant, fighting for freedom. Folks, we'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.